you ever wondered, can you communicate directly with spirit guides, teachers, or non-physical consciousness, or even our higher selves? What would they tell us? My name is Kevin Moore, and since 2015, I started to practice a form of communication which is termed channeling. I have been interviewing experts on my talk show to find out, does life continue after we die, and can we communicate with those that have crossed over? With each expert I spoke to, they all had different ideas. Is there knowledge from the past which could be shared with the present moment? So I thought, why not just speak to the non-physical world directly through channelers around the world? And that's what I set out to do. They Call Us Channelers will take the viewers on a journey into the phenomena known as channeling. And my main goal with this docuseries is to bring a new understanding and awareness to channeling by looking within ourselves and asking, is it truly possible that we can all use this innate ability? Well, I'm just grateful, Paul, for you giving me your time to do this.
Happy to be here.
Just really grateful because I do like your work. I've always liked your work. There's something exquisite about it. There's something I notice a difference between you and some of the others. I'm not putting you up higher or anything like that. I'm just saying it comes across in a different flavor, and that's always a beautiful thing to see when it's so different. So thank you for what you do, first of all. So we're going to get into your story, and then we're going to do some channeling as well. And I just want to very briefly just touch on childhood experiences, because there was one or two that happened in the childhood that do point to you being a bit more of a sensitive and empathic kind of kid at the beginning, I think.
Well, I mean, I was a highly sensitive kid, but I didn't know what sensitivity meant, except that there must have been something wrong with me. I mean, that wasn't a comfortable place to be. In terms of paranormal experiences, there were a couple, and they were filed away, even though they were important to me, because I wasn't growing up in a household where such things were discussed. I always used to say I was raised an atheist. My mother would probably say we were agnostic, but it really wasn't a topic of conversation in the house. But when I was about 5 or so, 4 or 5, there was an experience of something, a being, I think I called it an angel, hovering over the bed in my bedroom and speaking to me. And I know that I was being spoken to and taught, and it was important. I remember that very, very well. And I don't remember what was said, which has always infuriated me, but I remember sort of looking up at this being, you know, to my right, and then I remember watching the whole conversation from the ceiling and looking down on my body, and it's the only out-of-body experience that I have that I recollect, and maybe that's why I don't recall the content of the conversation. So that was important to me, and actually stayed important to me. And a question for me in some ways. And then later, you know, I had dreams that were, you know, precognitive, and I ended up visiting the campus of Goddard College many, many years before I ended up on the faculty there. When I was 9, I dreamt about walking up a flight of stone stairs to this fountain that was full of fall leaves. It was a technicolor dream and very, very vivid. And when I was 13, my family drove through, and I saw the campus, and I saw the stairs and the fountain, and I was shocked, and then even more shocked when I was invited out of the blue to apply for a job there when I was about 31. And I ended up working there for many, many years, running a graduate program. So, you know, those were the experiences from my childhood. Goddard was specifically important because my own abilities developed over the course of those years, and in many ways I feel that the work that I'm doing now is in some ways a reflection of that time
Oh yes, absolutely. And it's funny, isn't it, that you had that dream where it's almost like, did you see a future event? You know, what was it given to you so that you were like, when you got there, well, this is where my journey was supposed to have begun? Or is it saying as well that everything that's happening is happening now?
When I look back on it, I actually think, 9 years old stank. It was a rough, awful year of my life. And sometimes I think that an aspect of me from the time when I knew more went back and showed myself something that would then be an anchor for me. I don't think of time in a linear way when it comes to these things. So I don't know if it wasn't just the aspect of me sort of ensuring my well-being and giving me a marker. At the time in my life when I began teaching there, I was opening up spiritually. I was studying energy healing. The career that I thought that I was supposed to have seemed to be falling away from me, which was the source of much pain because I had a real investment in who I thought I was supposed to be in the world. And the idea that I was back in this place with this strange garden, meant to me that perhaps I was where I was supposed to be. I mean, interestingly enough, the campus has a very interesting history, and the little house built right next to the garden was built with the beams from the courthouse. I think it was in Salem or Ipswich when when one of the relatives of the people who built the farm was hung wrongly as a witch, back in those days. So there's an odd legacy there, and the fountain itself was said to be a vortex of some kind or a portal. I don't know what it was. All I know was, in my world, it gave me a sense of solace that perhaps I was where I was supposed to be, even when the evidence in my life seemed to be contrary to that.
I think that's interesting that you say that perhaps, and we're only saying perhaps here, but an aspect of you came back, or not came back, but presented itself just to guide you. I mean, would that say that there's Paul out there somewhere that's already fully known of this life, and you're able to contact aspects of yourself somewhere else, maybe?
I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility, given what I do. I mean, a lot of what I feel happens when I'm working is out of time. One of the things that I do that's not channeling per se, I mean, I like to say that I work as a radio, and I'm receiving information from the guides. I mean, they're the station that I'm playing when I'm in that broadcast. But one of the other things that I'm doing is I'm tuning into other people, usually the living. So, if you're having a problem with your, ex or a relative, and you give me their name, I can often step into them. I may begin to look like them and begin to hear them. And I used to think that I was like traveling through the air to step into that body and have this experience. And it was actually a physicist, it was Dean Radin at a conference, who said to me, you're not traveling elsewhere, you're going inside, you're going within. And it was like interdimensional travel, which was a concept I didn't know about. So the idea that things aren't the way that I was taught, and everything sort of operating by these rules of the physical reality that we know of, that my guides call this octave, they say it's an octave that we're operating in, was something that I wasn't prepared for. But I do think that we have access to, what's before and what's beyond, and all those things.
Yes, and an octave is like, I suppose, what some people have said to me potentially is a different level of frequency, a different frequency level, and different octaves, higher frequency.
Yeah. That's what the guides teach.
That's what they teach.
That's exactly how they teach it.
So keeping with your story here as well, just very briefly, so we found ourselves maybe in a rather painful situation at some point before this energy started to work through you. Where were you at when you sort of had your awakening experience? What was that, do you think?
Well, there wasn't an awakening experience. Initially, there was a bottoming out. I mean, I had been to Yale. I had a list of things that I thought I had to achieve in the world that I thought would make me okay. I got the whole list, and I wasn't okay. It was a fancy list. And by my estimation of what success might look like, I should have been quite satisfied for a 25-year-old. I was, a playwright. I was being produced in New York and London, and I was getting well reviewed and published in magazines, and sort of bottoming out and in a crisis, and I didn't know what to do. I don't know if I'd ever looked at one before, but I actually took the book out, and there was this thing that said prayer for people in crisis, and I said the prayer, and 3 days later I heard a voice, which was the first voice, telling me to get my act together. And I did. I was surprised, and I did. And about 3 months later, maybe 4 months later, there was this thing happening. It was 1987, called the harmonic convergence, and I heard people were going to be waking up. And I had just gone from living in a world, in a universe where there was no such thing as God, to one in which perhaps there was. And I thought, well, if there is a God, why wouldn't it want you to wake up? Why wouldn't it? So I went to the roof of the building that I lived in the night before this, what I thought was this big cosmic event, and I asked to be woken up, and I ended up having a bit of an experience, and it was an experience of energy moving through my body and out through the top of my head, and really, for all I know, I was hyperventilating. You know, I don't know what happened, but, you know, people said it sounded like a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, or a Shaktipa, or a soul awakening, or it didn't really matter. For me, it was something tangible, and it was an experience of energy that I could trust, and for me at least, became something that allowed me to proceed. I started seeing little lights around people after that. So now I'd heard something, I'd heard a voice, and I'd felt energy, and now I was seeing things. So my world was being sort of turned inside out from what I thought it was supposed to be.
Now, I don't know anyone that channels like you after meeting almost getting on to 60 now, right? You say the words very quietly and then you repeat them out loud, which I think is kind of cool, actually, the way you do it, yeah. But was that happening back then?
No, I wasn't channeling back then. I started off, I studied energy healing.
So when the voice came to you, it was your own voice?
It was a voice that crowded out all of my other thoughts, that took up the forefront of consciousness. I asked myself what I could do for myself that day that was positive, and a voice went boom, and I went, oh. Was it in my voice? I don't even recall. It was not an expected thought, and it was clearly other in my experience, and I acted upon it. When I hear now, there's certainly a different texture to the quality of voice than what I'm walking around listening to all day long if I'm listening to my own thoughts. But the experience of something crowding the forefront of consciousness, pushing itself through, and my own consciousness receding has always been part of it. When I first started hearing for other people, you see, in my case, I'm not a trained channel. Nobody taught me how to do this. I didn't know what I was doing. I was volunteering at a center for people in New York City. It was the height of the AIDS crisis, and I was doing hands-on work with people there. And I found that when I had my hands on people's bodies, I began to hear things for them. So if I had my hand in your chest and I heard the name, you know, Arthur, I learned to say, who's Arthur? And you might say, you know, my father, my lover, my brother, whatever. And as that kept getting panned out, I began to trust the information that was coming. And I started to do a little group that met in my apartment. This was when I was about 32, so we're many years ago now. I'm 56 now, so I've been doing this for a very long time. The moment I sat in the group, and I was in the group not to channel, because I didn't really believe in channeling, and I wasn't interested in it either. I was there to be in the energy that would come through. And the very first group, I started hearing instructions. And I began to honor them. And I was encouraged by the group to continue to, because when I would hear these things, there would be an energy that would come through that was palpable.
So is that when the guides first came through?
I think so, yeah. You know, although I don't know that I call them the guides. The only reason they're called the guides is my ex, from a number of years ago, when my ex found out I could do this, my ex used to say, oh, ask the guides this, ask the guides that. That's why they're called the guides.
And again, as many other people have spoken to, us humans give them the names.
Yeah, that's the name that I gave them, the guides. The other name that they've used is the one that they've come through with. And that came, I mean, that's always been present, but I'm much less attached to the names, I think, because I think the challenge with the names is that they attach to narrative and then potentially ego. And I think that gets a little bit tricky sometimes.
And I think probably it's always been like that.
I wouldn't be surprised, you know.
And I think in some form, maybe mankind has always channeled.
I think they probably have. I know that this isn't a new phenomena. I mean, it's really in all of recorded religion. So I don't think it's a new phenomenon, the least, and I think in different cultures they call it different things.
Yeah, I interviewed a native Indian, and they called it something different there.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, and when you speak to the native Indians, they say that they came from the Pleiades, of all places. I'm shocked when they told us that. But yes, they used to channel, different name.
Yeah.
And I think it goes way beyond that as well. So, but it is more accepted now. When I went to see you in person at your events for the 2 days, you know, to see how many people were there as well. You know, that audience used to be for the medium or the psychic, and now it's coming. That audience is coming to the channeler. That's very different to see that.
Well, I think in my case, you know, the guides that I work through have dictated now 6 books, all on the evolution of consciousness, and the books themselves are energetic transmissions that seem to work directly with the reader. So the readers are having this very palpable experience of energy. So people are coming, I think, to be in consort to the teachings, perhaps more so than to see Paul. You know, I mean, I really feel that I'm the guy that shows up for this work, and I'm the man that sits in the chair for what comes through and what transpires. So the audiences for this work or the work that I'm doing do seem to be growing, but I think some of that has been that I've been enormously consistent in showing up for it. I left a career in academia that I'd had for 25 years to do this full time because the demand for the work was escalating, and my feeling that, you know, perhaps this is what I was here to do, at least for some amount of time, you know, in a primary way, was inescapable.
I knew when I first interviewed you, I knew you was going to do this full time. I had that major feeling that you was. And yeah, when people show up, there sure is a vibrational energy transfer, it feels like, or some sort of energy in the words as well. And what I like as well about what you do is you're very open. You know, if the guys want to give you a teaching in front of the audience, which they did for us when we watched you, you know, they gave you a teaching in front of the audience. So Paul does not know this teaching, let us teach him. Yeah. There's a lot of transparency there.
Well, they can only often get to me in front of an audience because the rule is when I'm working, I'm not allowed to interrupt. I mean, I can interrupt them, but I can't stop it. Do you understand this? So if I'm channeling and all of a sudden, and they say, now we have something to say to Paul, if I were in my kitchen doing the dishes, I might say, thank you, no, and go off and do my own thing. I don't want to hear it. And it would be harder for me, I think, to accept the work that comes. When it comes in, when it's spoken aloud, there's a fact to it that I can't avoid. But they do that with me often, yeah.
Now, when you had your past life job as a teacher, I think there was a lot of joy in that job, a lot of love. You would know things about the students. Maybe they were thinking about a question or whatever it may be. You were aware, there was an awareness there of certain things, and they would probably be surprised at how you knew certain things in the class. But teaching is a form of love, which you said to me in my previous interview.
Yeah.
The highest form, you said.
Not the highest form of love. I don't think it's the highest form of love.
Sorry, maybe not the highest, but it's a good level.
I think it's not even about levels. I think teaching of any real value comes from a place of love. It's an act of love. It's an act of giving. And I think if it's not, it's an act of ego, and then it's something else. So You know, I feel that my years teaching were really, for me at least, my spiritual practice. And I was developing psychically over the course of those years, so it made itself present in the work. But, you know, while I was in the classroom, I mean, with my NYU students, I wasn't announcing it. When I was first asked to be on a television show, it's called The Unexplained on the Biography channel, I was asked if they could film me at NYU, because I was still teaching full-time there. And I immediately said, no, my department doesn't know what I do. And this is probably, what, like 7 years ago now? It's not a long time. And I hung up the phone and I thought about it, and, you know, and I went, you know, one of the things my guides teach is that the action of fear is to claim more fear, and every choice you make in fear gets you more of the same. And I sat there and I said, well, I just took a big fear-based choice. So I got back on the phone, I called up the chair of my department, and I said, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm an intuitive, and you know, the Biography channel is doing this little thing. And he said, well, that's A&E, that's fine, they can come, sure. I was shocked. I mean, I know he didn't hear intuitive. I think it went right out the window, but he actually signed off for the dean, you know, and suddenly this camera crew showed up in this little department I was in at NYU. And I had to tell my kids, I had to tell this group of freshmen, and it was halfway through the year. And I said, you know, I don't know if you know this about me. And they said, we know. And, you know, there were YouTube's videos up already of me channeling. They were very sweet. They hadn't said a word because I hadn't mentioned it. When the camera crew came, they got all dressed up and they sat there and pretended to be interested in a lecture they had already heard on Aristotle, you know, that I was giving again. And none of that footage got used in the show. But it was funny, and it showed me, really, that my investment in fear, I mean, you know, I wasn't looking to be known for this stuff. I actually had a website without my name on it or my photograph until after the first book came out, which was sort of outed me, and there was nothing more I could do about it.
And you've had, as well, a younger audience attracted to your work as well, haven't you?
You know, increasingly so, yeah, but I don't think that has a lot, I don't think that, I've never thought about that having to do with my work as a college teacher. I just think it's found its audience, and the audience is, I'm grateful to say, cross-generational.
Yes, I mean, that's my point, that it's cross-generational, and that's a nice thing for you, I think.
I think that's a nice thing for the work. You know, I enjoy the diversity of age and ethnicity and everything else that can happen in a workshop. I mean, I think, you know, if you look, I think, at who's often at a channeling, I mean, it can be the same audience, and you can probably transplant them in some way, probably amongst different kinds of spiritual workshops. There's the crowd, and I think my goal, I don't really, I mean, I was going to say my goal, but I don't really have one because I just sort of show up. But I think perhaps the goal is to reach the people that need to hear the work, whoever they may be.
I think that's very true, because, you know, your work isn't going to be for everyone, and nor is any of the other channels. You know, when people say, "Oh, I want to make a documentary that's going to, touch the world," and I'm like, well, maybe that message is not for everyone. You know. Some souls are at different levels, so you are souls that come to you, or people that come to you, they're attracted to the work because that's the level or octave that they're at, maybe.
Or it's what they've come to learn, or the teaching is speaking to an aspect of them and it's resonating as true. I mean, I don't figure it out. I mean, I wouldn't have come to my workshops 25 years ago. I would have been rolling my eyes and going, what the hell is this?
Well, then let me ask you then, when you started to channel, how resistive were you to that form of channeling that you've been doing?
Highly resistant. Highly resistant. I doubted everything the moment it was spoken. I mean, again, this is a long time past, and, you know, I wasn't lecturing in channel as I am now. I don't know much about how other people work, but I've been known to channel for 5 hours in a day, you know, in front of groups of people, and the books are dictated, and they're, you know, 300-page volumes over the course of several weeks.
But that takes a lot out of you to do that.
It's physically taxing to work at that level, yes, but I also feel that a whole lot is getting done, and it's not like I'm trying to overexert myself. So I don't remember what my point was. There was a point to it about how I work. Now, when I first started, at the very, very beginning, I used to feel when I channeled as if somebody had their lips pressed against my forehead and was literally impressing the vibration of the word into my forehead. And as that would happen, I was forming the words with my lips. And the transmission from me has always been the whisper. So the whisper is the transmission. The repetition used to be because nobody could hear what was first sort of coming out in the slow way. So it became this rhythmic thing. When I channel directly without the whisper, I expect, because it happens more and more these days, it's challenging for me because I don't remember anything. It becomes all sound to me. All I know is that I'm becoming the vowels and the consonants and the words without even understanding what the words are. And it's a very naked, scary place. This way, I'm able to sort of go, okay, but hey, wait a minute. So I often say that my process is as if I'm climbing into the back seat of a car and turning the steering wheel over to the guides. And from the back seat, sometimes I'm lying there reading a magazine and sort of basically ignoring the transmission, but mostly I've got an ear cocked, and when I hear something that strikes me as questionable or off, I lean over the front of the seat and I say, hey, and then they say, Paul has a question. And then they take the question. And at that level, I can feel, it's not about control, but I can feel that I'm in my integrity, Paul's integrity, as the channel. You know, I don't write these books, but my name's on the cover. And at that level, there's a little bit of a sense of, you know, I don't want to be party to something that's just, you know, too out there.
But then, saying that, Paul, the work that you're doing now, the latest book that's not come out yet, and further books are getting quite out there.
They're very out there, and what they're doing for me now, and what they've done with every book, is they prepare me for a little bit before the transmission of the book. So I have some sense of the landscape that they're going to be encountering. I think just enough that I'm not going to bail on chapter 2 and going, I can't do this anymore, this is too crazy. In the Book of Mastery, which was the 4th book of the series, early in the book, I think they say, you know, nothing is real, and they start to unpack it, and I went, okay, well, I've heard that before, that's okay, and they let them do their thing. And then the next day in the transmission, they were like, here's the teaching for the day, everything is real, and I panicked. I thought, because, the rule with all of the books is I can't go back and edit them. And these aren't written books, these are spoken books, spoken texts that have been transcribed. And then they basically told me to go for a walk around the block, and they just keep talking. And that's pretty much what happened. They just kept talking, and they unpacked that teaching as well. Later, I actually mentioned it to a religious scholar who was writing the introduction to the book. He's an expert on Gnosticism, Jeffrey Kripal. And he said, oh, yeah, nothing is real and everything is real. He said, that's Meister Eckhart. That's mysticism, like 13th century. I was like, oh, that's good to know. At least it makes sense to you. And he said, oh, yes, it makes sense to me. And I was like, fine then. But there have been challenges throughout. And I know it's getting out there, but I'm getting more comfortable with it because I can't not at this point. It's too much of it's proven itself out.
Good, I'm glad you are, because my main goal for the documentary was to be really far out there. Mm-hmm. I felt that I didn't want to do a documentary that was going to cover the basics again. I wanted something that was beyond the unknown.
Well, that's the title of the next series, is Beyond the Known, yeah.
I was channeling a book, I haven't finished it off yet, which was called Beyond the Current Understanding of Mankind. I called it Book 1. The documentary took kind of flavor over that, really. And from what I get told, the more we go into the unknown, the more it takes us back into present moment.
I don't disagree with that. I think you can go into the unknown in all kinds of ways. You can go into the unknown as projections into the future, which is what's going to happen if, and lose yourself there. But if you listen, the teachings that I get really are all about what's accessible in the moment. The guides I work with say, you can only know in the moment you stand in. You're not going to know tomorrow. You can't know yesterday. And knowing, they equate with realization. It only happens in the moment.
Now, what seems to be the truth for me right now is that we seem to all be working with different teams. Each channeler that I've met, there's a different team in place. And it's dependent on that team that you're part of to what the mission is or what they're out there to try and do. So it's so varied. And I can only talk about really what my group seems to be, which is going on the furthest fringes of beyond the unknown and looking for or trying to expand themselves in some way that it doesn't make any sense to me, right? But what's come through quite clearly these past few weeks is that the questions when I ask them, it's coming from them as well. This is their evolution working through me with them, and it's my evolution as well. And that wasn't really, that makes a lot of sense to me now, or at least, sense right now until it changes later on into something else. Just wanted to just part that there and just to put that in there. So that's my thrust for doing this probably. It's not just me. With your guides, what is the main teaching?
The main teaching, as I understand it, seems to be the realization and embodiment of what they call the true self or the divine self. It's been that really from the beginning, although I didn't understand that they were speaking to it in terms of manifestation. I initially thought that they were offering a spiritual teaching that would sort of, they were very clear even in the very first book that this was not self-help, that they don't teach self-help, that self-help is really for the small self or the personality structure. They're teaching the reclamation of our own inherent worth and the realization of the divine that they say is the truth of who and what we are. And how this happens seems to be being sequenced over a series of texts. I think in some ways the DNA for all of it may be in the very first book, which was called I Am the Word, because they reference ideas in that book still as we go forward. And what I thought was just a line that didn't have tremendous meaning, suddenly I realize has a whole book attached to it, if they really want to go and unpack the principle or the idea. But that's, would suspect, we would say it differently. Well, they're saying we would say it differently, the books are about realization. They're saying the books are about realization, what we've always been, of who and what you have always been, beyond what you have accepted thus far. And you say yes, until you say yes, which is our mission with you, which is our mission with you, with all ourselves, you will withhold it from yourselves. That is your prerogative, but it's not required. But it's no longer required. The divine as you is here to be known and seen. The divine as you is here to be known and seen and realized or coming to this. And your comprehension of this is what calls a new world to you, period. And they're saying period.
The small self. I struggle with what is that equal to in what other people may call it, do you think?
Personality structure. I don't know.
Ego?
The guides have used the term egoic structure, but ego is not a word that they really use. And my sense has been when they've used that, they've been nodding to our usage. But they talk about it primarily as what they say, personality structure, which they say knows itself through history. It knows itself through what it's experienced and been taught, which is different than the true self, they say, which actually exists out of time, but may know itself in time as who and what we are.
What are some of the other sayings that they have as well? There's a few, isn't there, that have been really powerful for people?
There are some things that they say often. They say you cannot be the light and hold another in darkness. What you put in darkness calls you to it. The action of fear is to claim more fear. They say, look at every choice you've ever made because you were in fear and see what it got you, which will be more of the same. They say, in truth, a lie cannot be held. There's never been a lie told that wasn't told in fear. And they say that really the truth of who you are, the divine as you, in realization, is what sort of dismantles the lie or the idea of who we are, which is sort of the operative idea of the small self.
The divine as you in realization. So the divine meaning, another word could be God. God is just dog spelt backwards. It's just a word. Is that God? Is that the divine as you? The
divine as you. Well, they in the first book, they use the term Christ and they unpack it. They unpack all the language, and their definition of Christ is the aspect of the Creator that can be realized in material form as who and what you are. So the interchangeable terms that they've used have been Christ itself, true self, eternal self, divine self, all meaning the same thing. But the active principle being the divine self is what seeks realization. So it's essentially what makes the seed of the oak tree grow into the oak tree and realize it, which is the divine spark or the true self in manifestation.
Why do you think it's seeking to realize itself after all the books you've written so far?
Is to know itself through the world it sees. The divine sees God in all it witnesses. It's really quite astonishing.
It is, but why could it not see that of itself in where it came from? Why this? Or where it comes from? Is it a bit like this but different?
I don't know how to answer that, because I think I can go to them and try to do this if I may, but in a way, positing the question is sort of to assume that who you are is really the personality and not the true self. And in fact, what they say the opposite of true is this is really the opposite. You're sort of being reclaimed as who and what you've always been. Now, they do say that everything exists in multiple octaves. The note C can be played. If you look at the keyboard on a piano, we assume that that's all the notes that there are to play, but you can play the note C up until infinity, and well off the scale that can be heard by the human ears, and the same at the low end as well. So they say everything is existing in multiple octaves, and we're essentially in this collective agreement to be operating here in this octave that we know. And all they're really doing with us is supporting our realization in the higher octave so that we can support the claiming of that through co-resonance in all we see, which is moving us beyond the level of fear, which we've been completely immersed in as far as I can tell.
What do the guys have to say about the law of attraction or manifesting that which you would like to see in your life?
I think to unpack it again, what the idea of what you would like to see in your life is still assuming that it's the small self that's trying to get something, and that's really not how they teach it. They say there's nothing wrong with a house on the hill, somebody gets to live there, but why do you want it? If you want the house on the hill so you can be the envy of your neighbors, or to prove your worth in some way, you're actually creating in fear. The guides say we're always creating. They call this the mudra of creation. We're always calling into manifestation what we see. Now, there are some people that say you're creating your own reality, but the guides I work with saying, we're in agreement to a collective reality as well that's essentially a shared plane of experience. Everything you see, they say, you're in vibrational accord with. Everything that has a name, you're confirming the name it was given and confirming the historical data that exists there through it. So in terms of how to get what you want, if that's what you're asking, they say different things. They say it's really at what level are you claiming, because you're always creating anyway. So you can be creating in a highway, which is beyond fear. There's a difference between saying, I am worthy of love, and saying I'm the only one worthy of love, which would be a low claim. And people are often operating from the low without even knowing it.
Or saying that I can only help people with having a load of money, and actually you don't need the money to help people, really. You could do it in a different way.
Well, yeah, certainly that. Conditions that are put on what it means. The guides say, they talk about frames. They say this is a frame. We all have these frames that we walk around in, and the purpose of a frame is to fulfill itself, what it thinks should be there. So if I say the world is an unsafe place, and that's my frame, I'm going to continue to call to myself what I expect that frame to bring me. And every time the world is proven to be unsafe, I get to pat myself on the back because I'm right. So they pretty much say we're always getting what we expect at a certain level. Maybe not what we want, but what we expect. And therefore, we're always in manifestation, because the consciousness that we're broadcasting from is always claiming through co-resonance our experience here.
Have they ever talked about other life in the galaxy or the universe, in a sense?
No, not necessarily. They may get that into the next book. The next series of books, they've already, agreed to the title, and the publisher has it, so it's called Beyond the Known. And everything I expect that they're going to be teaching is beyond what they've already spoken about thus far. And I'm just sort of holding my head, hoping that I'll be able to keep up with it and not bolt from the room.
You will. I know you will. I
I hope.
Will. Oh, you will. You will. They've built you to this point, haven't they? They've built you to this point. If they had given you the harder stuff now, you would have gone, and
you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
they've been patient with me in my process, and it's been a very public process. I mean, the last book was dictated entirely in front of an audience, and workshops.
Is that pressure? Do you feel the
The pressure is that I don't change things. Up until now, I mean, I think in the last book, there were 3 words maybe changed and that's because I mispronounced them, in the verbal channelings.
But when I've brought my book through, and it's, am I that impressed with it? Well, I fought it all the way, right? And it's only a small book, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not released yet. It will be soon. It's just being edited.
Mm-hmm.
It's had to be edited. Every time I was doing it, they were saying, his English the use of this body is terrible. It wasn't like that. They didn't express it like that, but it was more of the case of, his English, his grammar is do excuse us, the grammar from this vessel is not very good.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't said like that, but it was somewhere around that, and that maybe taught me a lesson that so. They come through you, and it's completely clear. And some may say, the better the channel, the clearer the channel, the more that's going to be perfect. But I would say, I'd have to back up there and say, no, you've got a wonderful. You're a teacher. Your English is perfect. Yeah. So why wouldn't it come through perfect? With myself, it's going to come through choppy, because I also feel as well, on interviewing so many almost 60 something, is that you are only as a vessel able, or as a channel able, to give out that which you have the knowledge of anyway. Really, this idea that we can bring scientific formulas out, or high, amazing whatever material that's beyond our understanding, like mathematics or whatever it may be, something that's really has no reference in this vessel that it comes from. I don't think it works like that. That's my opinion.
I think it can. I mean, Edgar Cayce was closing his eyes and doing diagnostic work that he was an uneducated man. I don't think that, regardless of my vocabulary, which probably isn't as extensive as you think, what was comfortable for me finally was lecturing. I had done that for years, so I was comfortable sitting in a chair and talking to people. But I don't think that I'm capable, through any act of will, of delivering 6 books that don't require editing. Now, that's not to compare how I work to how you work or how anybody else works. I do think that whatever innate abilities one has, like anything else, is probably going to be used in a positive way.
It's going to be beneficial, isn't it, for the channel and for those that are coming through the channel?
I personally make a distinction between inspired work and channeled work, and I don't put one higher than the next. I just make the distinction. When I was a playwright, I could be inspired. I get a blast of inspiration. I try to figure out what to do with it, and I would craft it and all of those things. The difference here is that I'm closing my eyes. I hear one phrase, not even a whole sentence usually, repeated, usually a few times before I trust it, and then the moment I say it, everything else just comes out on top. That happens to be my process. Because I actually don't know other channels, it seems like everybody who's working, I don't. And because I don't, I am in the grateful position of not having to compare how I work. I don't like to watch myself work. I find it perturbing. I wish at some days that I were one of those people that could sit in a chair and just be graceful with it. But for me, it's an extraordinarily physical process. My body is being used. I'm transmitting energy. When I work, there's often an energy that's extraordinarily palpable to those in the room. So it's a form of almost physical mediumship for me. But I don't know how other people are doing it, nor do I need to have any kind of judgment about how that works.
I mean, should I be bothered if that which I channel sometimes is inspired? Would it really matter? It'd be nice to, well, that's my, that's just my journey, isn't it? That I've.
I remember reading a book, a channel book, when I was in my late 20s, and I read in the introduction that somebody had edited out the negativity, and I'm not going to say that that was a bad thing. I don't know if Helen Schuckman or Jane Roberts had editors working with them. Perhaps they did. In my specific case, thus far, the rule has been that I don't go back and change things. That's how these books are, and maybe that's unique to this book. I know, and I know this for a fact, I was very fortunate. The guys that I work with, at the end of the book, they said, this is going to be published. It's the first publisher who reads it. Don't haggle. They said, small metaphysical press, don't haggle. And I went, okay. I didn't even think there was a real book until I typed the whole thing up, and I went, my God, this really reads like a book. How interesting. I had the manuscript proofread for spelling errors. I think we caught about a third of them. It was really a messy manuscript in retrospect. Took it to Kinko's, copied a few, and threw them in my suitcase when I was about to go off to channel at the Esalen Institute, which was the first time I was ever invited to channel outside of my living room. And the editor from Tarcher Penguin happened to be there, and he took the manuscript with him on the plane. And I think he wrote me from the plane and said, this is very interesting. And then the next email was, can you come into my office? And it was published within 8 months. And the mutual understanding between the two of us was we weren't going to go back and fix things. If you look at the books that come through me, there are times when the pronouns don't agree or the tenses. It's an odd language. But you see, the difference is I'm a spoken channel. Mm-hmm. I'm not a written channel. There are people that are written channels, and that's another way of working. I'm a spoken channel, and so the books are really the oral teaching transcribed. The strange thing is they read like complete books. But for me, that helped me, and it's also why doing a book is somewhat nerve-wracking. Because if on chapter 5 they say, guess what, the moon is made of green cheese, that's in the damn book, and they're going to have to explain it, or that's the end of the book. Do you understand?
I do.
And at that level, I find it stressful. It's like every session is jumping off a diving board and praying to God that there's water in the pool. Fortunately, so far, there has been.
And I'll speak to your guys in a moment about why our paths are so different as an example for other people as well. Mm-hmm. As an example for other people, because I think that's interesting, just what they would say about that. How has your family taken the work that you're doing?
They're fine. I mean, I only have 2 living family members. There's a few more, but immediate family, there's only 2 of us. I have a mother and a brother. They're both supportive of this work. I think they were both surprised. My mother came to the very first book signing for the first book and sat there, and as I told my story, I saw her looking sort of sad and bewildered, and I realized that she really didn't know about my life and how it evolved in this way, because it wasn't something that was easily discussed. So I think they've done a noble job catching up, and I don't feel unsupported by them. And for me, becoming public with this work has been an ongoing challenge over my adult life. Sometimes I was too effusive about it, other times I wanted to hide under the couch and not have anybody know. I can't tell you, sometimes I think I'm having a date with somebody and then I find out that they understand what I do and they say, I'm sorry, but what you do is just too far out. And, I go, okay, that's still the world. I used to say, when people say, what do you do? Sometimes I would say, I'm a teacher and a psychic, and they would say, oh, what do you teach? As if the psychic thing had never been mentioned. Now, it's the psychic thing that's present.
And they're just not the right people for you, but you know that. But that's a shame that people do act that way towards you. That's
It's much better than it used to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you also have this psychic ability as well, which is very interesting. Mm-hmm. You've got both.
Yeah, I do both, and one I feel confirms the other, and I'm grateful for that. I mean, people can think he's just talking, and what is all this stuff, and I feel this tingly energy, but what's really going on? And the moment I step into their, the energy field of their teenage daughter, and I make the teenage daughter's face, and I say, get those damn braces off me now, and the father says, she said that yesterday, we're usually okay. They're sort of on board with what I do. And I like the empathic work. I enjoy it. I find it, for me, and I say this, but channeling in a lot of ways is taking dictation. I feel that that's the job of my work as a channel, is taking the dictation. I can enjoy being in the energy. I enjoy the energy that comes through and the phenomena that's attached to it. My eyes often, I'm told, turn bright blue when I'm channeling, and I find that very interesting. That there are sort of chemical changes in the body with this. But the psychic work is more creative for me because when I'm doing that, I get to interpret some, and it's a little more publicly present. So Paul is there for that in a different way than he is when he's channeling. Basically, when I'm working psychically, I get to sit up in the front seat of the car next to the guides. And I'm not in the back seat saying, what are you really talking about? I don't know if I understand it.
I love your psychic work. I've seen you in person. It's fascinating. And again, you're doing it so differently to everyone else. I can honestly say that.
The good news is I don't know what anybody else is doing, and that's why, I don't go there, and I buy everybody's books and I don't read them. And, part of my excuse has been I don't want it to be informed. Once in a while, somebody will read me a passage. And once there was a woman who I love, she's a prayer minister that I work with from the Agape Church in LA, and she read me a paragraph and I thought it was the guides, and it was somebody else, and I was so thrilled that the same kind of message was coming out from some guy out in Scotland who I'd never heard of until that day.
What do we do with discernment with your work, or any work in this field?
I think it's very important. I think, it's got to prove itself out in one way. With what I do, there's an energy component that is present for most people. And so people that are coming to the workshops are having their own experience of this energy. And a result of that, they can be in their own knowing, they can claim it for themselves, and they don't have to defer to me. And I don't want anybody to defer to me. It's the last thing I want. The moment that starts to happen and people start to assume, put me in that role, I don't want it. And I think it's a tricky role to be in, and I think very few wear it gracefully. And I'm not a guru, and I'm not a spiritual teacher, and that's not how I want to be. I'm happy to show up for this work as I do. For me, there are a few things around discernment that I think are important. I think any teaching that is fear-based is questionable, and is probably, if it is coming from elsewhere, it's probably low-level astral stuff. Anybody who's teaching fear, I think, is something that I don't want to be party to. And the other thing that I'm very watchful for are when people are given messages that are somewhat self-important or about being special or unique. Now, we're all special, but the appeal to ego, I think, is something else that I'm very conscious of and cautious around when I hear it, because I think it's bait, and it's low bait to take.
That would make me run a mile away if those that are coming through did not see us as some form of equal.
It's not about that. No, special is the idea when people are saying, and I have this in my own practice, people come to me and they say, I've been told that I'm the reincarnation of so-and-so and I'm here to heal the world. And that's what my guides are saying. And I go, oh dear, because the message is all about the uniqueness or the specialness of the channel. And that's when I get cautious around this stuff. I have my relationship with my guides, so I don't know, I think at a fundamental or at a high level, the divine exists in all things, and at a certain level, nobody's separate from anything, and it's all one big God thing. But I think it's God expressing itself in different ways and at different levels of consciousness. Now, I've been doing this work now in one form or another for over 25 years. I've developed over this, and I've fallen through many of the cracks and gotten hard lessons as a result of that. And I developed through them. I didn't emerge fully formed doing this work. I showed up for this work consistently, and I do believe that, like anything else, there is some skill that's present that is developed through the doing of it.
And obviously your past life's doing it as well.
I believe that that's true. I believe that my energy system in whatever way seems to have been in support of the work that I do now, yes.
But then, we have, when you started out, the social media wasn't there like it was. YouTube wasn't there like it was.
It wasn't there at all.
No, not at all.
I didn't even have a computer when I started.
Right. And now you see it, and now YouTube channels pop up with channelers, and they only need a couple of thousand subscribers from what I've seen of some of these channelers, and they're away, and then they're giving their message out there, and people are getting readings from them and all sorts. And it's like, well, you say to yourself, have they gone down a fast track route? Where was their training on some of these?
I think some of this is cultural. I can't speak to these people because I don't know their work. And there may be people that show up that are fully formed and the gift is present and they're a bit of a savant. I learned, I developed, I showed up. And through some of that, I hope, I learned some discernment. But we're also living in a culture right now where people see a few YouTube videos and become an expert in something.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
And, when I studied energy healing, which was nearly 30 years ago, which is when I started to open up that way, I studied with a woman who at the time was one of the first 13 Reiki masters in the US, and that seemed to be, the little I know, at a time when you basically gave your dowry and apprenticed for years. And it was a very different culture, and she was teaching something different than Reiki by then. She'd already moved into her own work. And I have to say, in retrospect, she really empowered me by nature of what she did to do my own.
Yeah.
I remember, I asked another medium when I was in my maybe 31 or something. And I said, is this ever going to be what I'm going to do? Because I was ready. I was already doing a group in my apartment. I'm doing a group in my apartment. I was ready. And I remember saying to this woman, when am I going to do, is this ever going to be what I do? And she said, yeah, like at around 48, 50. And I was horrified. What? I have to wait? And what she said to me in retrospect is interesting. She said, actually, yes. She said, you've been veiled for your own protection. And in retrospect, for whatever reasons, and I don't know if that was true, but in retrospect, it doesn't feel wrong. I would not have been able to handle it when I was younger. I would not have.
Isn't that
there
interesting?
There would have been much too much ego present and a need to be seen in a certain way and all of those things. So my path is my path. I do feel that the energy is less dense now than it was in terms of development than it used to be. I think things can happen quickly. I don't think people have to wait 100 years. I do think the idea that this is as, I don't want to dismiss anybody. I was going to say instant enlightenment. I think it does happen in an instant, but I think that that instant is well prepared for by many things.
Well, you look at some of these younger mediums on TV now, the Hollywood medium, for example. You know, he's young and he's doing this work, but it's a very different type of work to what we're discussing here, in a sense as well, because he's giving some sort of validation where, for me, it doesn't matter how much validation you give people, it will never be enough anyway, right? But this work is it's about teachings, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not a spiritual medium, and I respect that work enormously, and I think people are trained in that work and doing remarkable things with it, and I'm really glad it's there. They call me a medium for the living because I can hear those that are still alive. I've actually stepped into people that were, you know, without language because of physical disability and been able to give accurate messaging to family members, people in comas, things like that. You know, they have a body, I can usually access them at some level. But the guides that I work with, as you said, are teaching. So they're there to teach. I show up expecting them to teach through me, and that's what they do, and that's the encounter. And, you know, that seems to be what I've been prepared for in this work.
Is there anything you might like to add to this?
You know, I do what I do. I'm the guy that sits in the chair. I show up often when I don't want to for this work. It's what I've agreed to. I can't say that I understand it. I don't consider myself to be an expert in it. I don't teach other people how to do it. And I'm not the one to decide for somebody else what is true. My guides say what is true is always true. And that, to my mind, sort of suggests that when we're working at an accurate and a high level, we're working at a true level and not at the level of fashion or the style of the moment or any of those things. So all I know is I didn't expect to be a channeler. I am still uncomfortable calling myself one, so I don't. I might say I'm Paul, I channel, and I work as an empath. It's what I do when I'm in that state, but I don't take that on as an identity that I wear like a robe, because I think that to do that with anything is limiting. To say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm an attorney, is to claim that identity. Hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a dentist. That's really valuable when you need a dentist. It's really valuable when you need a lawyer. But what I do is I'm Paul expressing in this way, and one of the ways that I seem to express is through this ability that happens when I am willing and able to get out of the way.
Well, I think you are valuable, and I think you being a channeler is valuable as a lawyer, because we need a channel sometimes.
I'm not saying it's any less valuable. I think the idea isn't really about the value. It's about the idea that we are our occupations or we are our gifts.
Which, beyond all this, we're much more. We're this timeless, unknowing, unnameable, unlabelable isness of that's always been, it feels like, or at least has more awareness than what we have in this very fractured or tiny section that we're in right now. That's not the right word I want to use, but anyway, the words left in my brain, but aspect, that's the word.
Yeah, when people ask me what I do, I'll often say I work as a channel and as a psychic, and I teach, and I deliver these books. You know, that's the expression of doing. It's not the claim of being.
I'm glad you did do this work.
I am too.
I'm really,
Thank you.
I'm just grateful that you did it, because there would be a hole there without you.
Perhaps. I mean, if there is a fabric, and this is what I'm contributing as part of that fabric, I'm happy to be contributing.
Good. Well, Paul, just thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let me ask one more thing. On Paul as well, just what is your website?
It's my name, paulselig.com, Paulselig.com.
One of my main questions I'd like to ask the guides is, come back to this again about truth, right? So we've got the guides and their truth, and then I meet some other channelers, and it's said maybe in a different way, which kind of makes it feel like it's a different truth. Some may be different truths. So is truth universal, or depending where the entities are coming from, is that their truth from the space that they occupy?
What is true is always true. How it's described may differ. The language used may change. The language used may change, but finally what is true is always true. But finally, what is true is always true. The divine as you, call it whatever name you wish, call it whatever name you wish, is always true, is always true. The aspect of you in manifestation, seeking to realize itself in fullness is always true, is always true. The idea of who you are, the personality structure, how it knows itself, in a world is not always true, is not always true. Your age may change, your idea of who you are, may transform. So the personality structure in many ways is transient, you live a life, you have experience, you come back, you learn differently, you learn differently. There are different things to learn in different forms, there are different things to learn in different forms, but the true self as you, the aspect of you that has come, that knows who he is, in a high way is ever true, He is asking, what about others, what to say, what about what others say? There are many opinions, there are not many truths, we understand, while the idea of personal truth is interesting and invested in by you, that is not a truism, a personal truth, my idea of truth is generally an opinion, of what is, truth is never changing. Truth is never changing. The eternal self, the divine, that's another thing, the divine which invests in everything and is of everything, finally is always true. Period. And they're saying period.
Well, to them, and I'm not going to get into specifics of what they said because I can't quite remember it all, right, sometimes, but there was differences. So am I using the wrong words here? I mean, is it for me to tell you that maybe I'm using the wrong... What if there's differences of expression of what they said, but that could still be true?
Well, if you're asking my guides to confirm or deny what you're hearing elsewhere, I don't know that they're going to do that, nor should they. Now, what I heard them say just now is truth, and it may express itself in different ways and in different languages. We live in a world where people say, my truth is. Yeah. And whenever I've heard the people say that, the guides have said, that's not your truth, that's your opinion. And there's a vast difference between opinion and truth. Now, it's true that at this moment in time, you and I are always having this conversation on this day, at this hour. You and I are always doing this. But are we always doing this? No, we're not. So you see, it's always true that this is happening in this moment in time. It is not always true that we are here. Do you understand the difference?
I do, and that is true.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll use it from my perspective of my group taught me. They once said to me, and they still will always say this, I think they would, right? I think they would, that when we cross over, we take our truth of what we think is true with us. And that's able to evolve as we discover something more about ourselves.
They're saying your understanding of truth would be inaccurate. So it would be an accurate way to state that. Your understanding of truth, which is very different, than what truth is, Your understanding of truth. Your understanding of truth may evolve through lifetimes, That would be an accurate assessment. That would be an accurate assessment, but it doesn't change the truth of who you are. Do you understand the difference here?
Of course, well, 100%. That makes complete sense. That's right. I mean, I may have a truth right now that, it's my understanding that I'm a soul having a human experience, and I may take that truth with me once I've taken my last breath. But once I'm aware of something else, or in some other place, or wherever I end up, or maybe I'm there already, or I'm just integrated back into a fuller aspect of myself, whatever, right? I may be more aware of other things around me then, or a greater part of myself, so maybe my understanding would change.
Yeah, I think your understanding does change. I think at this level of agreement that we're all sharing, we're knowing ourselves in these bodies and in this time with these shared events in our world that help us decide things about who we are to one another and everybody around us. I mean, I think that's one way of being. Is this all that is? Absolutely not. Now, this is a reality, and you could say at that level it's real, and I suppose you could say at that level it's true. But my understanding of this is only one way that we're expressed. And in the higher octaves, you can call it the true self, the higher self, whatever, that aspect of you that has access to far more, we're operating in somewhat of a different landscape. Do you understand that?
100%.
Yeah.
And one of the things that my guys told me, or my group told me, was that there is almost infinitive octaves to go to, or levels they call them to go to. It's endless in a sense.
Yeah, I think I don't get anything different than that. They haven't unpacked that yet, but I've heard inference to that in the teachings that are coming through now. And they basically say if you're walking down a hallway, every choice, every corridor leads to another reality that can be known and comprehended.
Okay, thank you. So let me just ask your guys as well. I feel that I'm working as part of a team, part of a group. Whether that changes as my understanding changes, it could do. Right now, excitedly as I am, that's my kind of understanding. So if I'm working with a group, is my group, if they could tell me this, are they wanting to go beyond the unknown as they seem to be guiding me?
I mean, if you're asking me to read you, which is what I would have to do, I can step in at that level.
Would you? Right. Okay.
I don't know if my guides will comment on your guides and their agenda. I don't know if that, for the most part, I find that they don't. And some of that I believe is respectful. But again, I don't read on other psychics. People say, the psychic told me this, what do you get? And I say, I'm sorry, I don't do that. I'll step into you and see where you're at, if I may.
Thank you.
You actually come through saying, I want everything to be what it says it is. I don't trust myself yet. And you're saying, I don't trust myself yet. That's the only issue here. That's the only issue here. I hear you're being carefully taken care of through this process. But I don't think you're going to understand it until you're on the other side of this, and this is a passage for you. I hear this is a passage for you, and an important one, and an important one. Don't expect everything now. Don't expect to know everything now. You're being prepared to know what you can know. You're being prepared to know what you can know, and all you can know is what you can hold. And all you can know is what you can hold, what your consciousness can handle, what you can acclimate to, and what you can acclimate to. There is no point in information. There is no point in information, no matter how glamorous it seems, no matter how glamorous it seems, how fast it may sound, how fascinating it may sound. If you can't comprehend it, if if you can't comprehend it, which means to be in resonance with it, to prepare yourself to hold that level, to hold at that level requires your alignment, requires your alignment. This is well beyond information. This is well beyond information. It has to do with the field itself. It has to do with the field itself, moving to a level of recognition, moving to a level of recognition of what you are teaching, and being taught and being taught. You understand this? Do you understand this?
Completely.
Other than that, it's an equation on a blackboard. It's an equation on a blackboard that sounds intelligent, we have no idea what it means, but you have no idea what it really means. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with yourself. Learn through doing, stay in discernment. Stay in discernment. Don't try to be an expert. Don't try to be an expert. There are no experts. There are no experts. There are different ways of learning. There are different ways of learning and expressing as you learn, and leave it at that,
And I would completely agree with everything that's coming through you right now, 100%, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that sometimes I'm being guided by them, or when I'm doing the questioning, sometimes I just know they're coming through. So they're getting something from me as much as I am from them right now.
You're being trained. I hear you're being trained, so to see one being trained. So to see one being trained or develop has gratification, but it's less about the development, but it's less about the development of the one training, than the agreement that is made between the two, You are not an aspect of them. You are not an aspect of them at the level where you command their will, You are of them. You are of them to the level that you can be in cohesion to them, that you can be in cohesion to them and receptive to the higher vibration and receptive to the higher vibration, to decide that you are the one doing this, and for the benefit of them, would put you back in the driver's seat, and cease to be effective, as the one who is receiving, Understand, friend. You are learning. Stop hurting yourself. Stop hurting yourself with what you don't know yet. It's the worst way to be taught. To make yourself wrong. Let yourself be guided. Let yourself be guided by your errors, and by your benefit, Both are wonderful ways. Both are wonderful ways to step forth and reclaim who you are. This is not about channeling. Finally, we say it's about your own expression. It's about your own expression, whatever form it may take. Channeling is the idea you're holding. Channeling is the idea you are holding for your expression. Your expression transcends channeling. Everybody's does. Period. They're saying period.
The expression transcends channeling. Everyone's does. Yeah.
Your expression is more than what you do. The radio is more than the station it plays. Do you understand? I just made it up, but the radio is more than the station it plays. So the station that I am, the radio that I am, Paul, is tuning into things all the time, is playing many different broadcasts. When I'm channeling, I'm attending to a broadcast. Who I am as a being in vibration is being supported through that process and development. But I'm also learning through this exchange as Paul and having all these other experiences just as you are. So if I say channeling is my expression, it's one of them. One of the ways that I operate.
And I like that because it's so limited otherwise, isn't it? Who wants to... I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. Maybe we're the same like that because I wouldn't be saying it to you. You wouldn't be saying it to me otherwise, probably. Mm-hmm. Others are quite happy that that's theirs. Mm-hmm. That's fine. Mm-hmm. I've always felt like I wanted to be more than just that.
Well, you have to be. Everybody is. So
well, I suppose they are.
It's just it's again. It's a way of claiming identity, but we're more than
I
usually
wanted,
what we claim.
thank you. I wanted to show that because that's not just my journey there, and
Mm-hmm.
that what came through there. That's others watching this as well.
I hope. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. You know, what I did, and I'll tell you what I did if it's of help. I sat in a chair for 18 years before a small group of people who put $10 in a basket once a week. And I showed up for it even when I decided I didn't believe in this stuff anymore and it was too hard and my life seemed to fall apart and I couldn't trust. But I showed up for my work at that level. And in retrospect, I feel that through that I was being prepared for some of what I do now. And my work changed. When I was doing this, it was in 2008, the guides began to deliver full lectures through me. It wasn't until 2009 that I became willing to transcribe and record. I didn't want to hear it before then. And once I became willing to do that, they began to write books. But in retrospect, I was being prepared for what I do for quite some time. And I feel that my part in this was to show up and continues to show up in spite of the days when it's the last thing I want to do, or I find the new age just crawling with problems or stuff or whatever it may be. It's really still showing up in the understanding that I'm learning through this as much as anybody else is, and that I'm not in charge of it at the level of personality. And that's the gift. If I thought I was in charge of this, screw it. And that's what gives me some confidence. I don't think I can keep showing up, closing my eyes and having this stuff pour out that makes sense, that's often beyond my capacity to comprehend.
Thank you for that message, because that's a kind of reminder of what was just said as well previously, and what the guys just brought through as well there. You're being trained and guided, yeah.
But by your experience with it, and that I think is true for anybody.
Yes. Yes. I wonder what their take is on, or why there's so many other channels out there. Are they aware of the other channels? I mean,
I don't even know if I want to go there.
No.
I mean, it's not the point. Do you know what I mean? If I was a painter and I was doing a certain kind of work, and there's a million painters out there doing different kinds of paintings, and some of them may be paint by numbers, some of them may be masterpieces. There's all these different ways to be expressing an art. They're just different ways of expressing. Now, are the guides aware of other channels? Why wouldn't we be? The answer there is, why wouldn't we be? Because at a higher level, everything is conscious. Everything is consciousness, but the discernment you require. But the discernment you require, we would have to suggest, is the quality of the teaching, is the quality of the teaching and your disbursement of a teaching, and your disbursement of a teaching. You must be authority. You must be authority to your own creation here, to your own creation here. It is your mandate, and it is your mandate to understand what you are proposing, to offer to your audience, if the work is in its integrity. If the work is in its integrity, please say so. Please say so. If the work is not, how is it supporting your audience? How is it supporting your audience? This is your discernment. This is your discernment. We'll not answer this for you. We will not answer this for you, nor should we. Your process here, as you have agreed to do this, is to choose wisely, Choose in the highest way you may. Don't seek to be lauded for your work. Don't seek to be lauded for your work. Let the work speak for itself. Let the work speak for itself and do its job in the world, and do its job in the world. That is not your problem. That is not your problem, to let the work do its own job. To let the work do its own job. Your job is to present the work. Your job is to present the work in the highest way you're allowed. In the highest way you're allowed. Step out as much as you can. Step out as much as you can. Let the other voices be heard, and let the other voices be heard. Stay in your own integrity here. Stay in your own integrity here. Be the teacher and the student at the same time. Be the teacher and the student at the same time. Do not damn yourself. Do not damn yourself for where you haven't been yet. Understand the road unfolds. Understand that the road unfolds as the journey is prepared. As the journey is prepared. You are prepared. You are prepared. The journey is forthcoming. The journey is forthcoming. This is simply one way forward. This is simply one way forward in your own evolution. In your own evolution, with what you call your guides, with what you call your guides, and your work as well, and your work as well, period. And they're saying period.
Yeah, it's almost like I just really want an answer somewhere on something. And it's like, I feel like I've gone so deep with some of these people, and they brought the most, some people might say, the most craziest stuff out, right? I don't think it's crazy, some of it, but I mean, you know, it's just more than probably even you could handle, right? If I told you, if you were to watch the shows back with me, you'd be like, I can't handle that. That's like, you know, kind of deep. Or I bet, you know, can that be true? If there isn't, you know, why would someone bring that out as that, or well, say that under channel? I would even say I don't even know what I know right now, so...
That's fine, and maybe that's the film. You don't know what you know. Here's what I encountered on this journey. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they said don't try to be the expert.
And now I'm glad they said that, right?
Yeah.
I don't want that title. I don't want to be... I mean, yeah, people might say, do you want to come to this conference and talk about what your journey was?
Talk about what you can talk about what you know in your own experience. That's
Which
all you can
probably
really
would be on
talk
stage.
about.
I'll be like, I'll play a video, and here's some other people's truths. Yeah.
Well, but then you're back to other people's opinions. You see, you've got to be conscious of your language here. You have to be conscious of that. And this is, I think, one of the things that they were saying to you, which was interesting. So you are accountable to what you call forth and what you bring forth. So other people's truths, or what, if you say what other people believe, and this is their personal truth, I think that's fine. But, you know, my truth might be that we have a terrible president, and there are other people that believe that he's a gift from God.
Yes.
And so those are opinions, finally. And to even call those truths, I mean, I suppose you could say that, and that they're framing a worldview of reality, also diminishes the possibility that there is a common truth to be comprehended, and a truth that transcends the immediacy of agenda and how people want to project onto something else. Does that make sense? It's the way out of the trap that we're kind of in.
No, I don't get that. No.
It's the idea of opinion, and it's what they said. So, you know, everybody believed that the world was flat for a very long time.
Yes, they did.
And that was the collective truth.
They believe it now.
They're back to believing it. But the idea being that it was never true, but it was the collective truth. The collective truth right now, where there are so many colors in the spectrum. And according to my guides, that's actually not true at all. There are colors we haven't even conceived of yet, because we're limited in our own ability to experience. So it's true that at this time, this is what the color spectrum is. But it's not always true.
But then that's what my team said, that it's true what you know now until you cross over, but that's not...
Then we're speaking semantics and definitions.
We are, but it's not true once you've gone over. There may be something greater.
But then you're speaking to individual truth and giving it a validity that I would have to question a little bit. My personal truth may be that I'm in a terrible marriage. Do you understand? And I can say I'm in a terrible marriage and my spouse doesn't understand me. And I can make that case. My spouse may be in a completely different relationship with me and think we're having a great old time, and what's the problem? Now, the reality may be somewhere in the midst of all this. But I think, let me get it from them if I can, because this is really their teaching, and perhaps I'm not in a position to try to teach it
I was
myself
following
yet.
you there.
We would like to say it very different. They're saying we would like to say it very differently, the idea that Paul is trying to express. The idea that Paul is trying to express as the truth in an individuated way is that truth in an individuated way is always framed by the personality, is always framed by the personality who's seeking to reinforce an idea, who is seeking to reinforce an idea of what he believes, so of what he believes to be so in the personality self. When the personality self is no longer the equation, is no longer the equation, you're operating in a higher way, and you are operating in a higher way, you transcend the mess. You transcend the mess that the personality has wrought, that the personality has wrought. You transcend the ideas. You transcend the ideas of fear and separation, that you have honored and claimed a world in, and claimed a world in. When these things are not present, when these things are not present, your idea of who you are, your idea of who you are, and consequently as truth, and consequently what you know as truth is remarkably different, and this does discount what you knew, and this does discount what you knew and renders it to the level of idea, and renders it to the level of idea. To use the word truth to describe it, to use the word truth to describe it is to use the word making love, is to use the word making, those words making love, to say every sex act is the same, to say every sex act is the same. There are different ways to express. There are different ways to express. Do you understand the difference here? Do you understand the difference here? To call it all one thing, to call it all one thing actually debases the very thing that it is, the very thing that it is. If everything is truth, and can be called at the same level, and can be called at the same level, you've negated truth. You've negated truth and limited your own idea of what it can be, and limited your own idea of what it can be, period.
Well, okay, then we're saying don't limit the truth then, in a sense.
That's not what I just heard. What I just heard was you limit truth by calling everything true. You actually reduce the idea of a truth. But
who is truth? Who is?
It's not a who is truth. It is a what is truth, and they've already said what is true is always true.
It's always true.
It's true
what is
that
true
right now you wear glasses. It's not always true that you wear glasses. It may be true that you're in a male body. It may not always be true that you're in a male body. It may be true that you have brown hair. It may not always be true that you have hair. Do you understand this?
But that's quite logical.
That's the same, but it's the same idea. That's the best as I can do it. The last book, if you want it, I'll give you a copy. It's called The Book of Truth. And that's the entire book, is what I'm trying to express to you. I'm happy to give you one. I think
I'd love to take one.
Here, and
Okay.
hopefully it'll save some time, because
it's
not something to really debate.
No.
I mean, it's something you're welcome to disagree with and have your own understanding of, and I do think at a certain level it's language. It's like when they used the example, which was a surprising one. If I call everything making love, that might be a physical act of intimacy or sex. By doing that, I diminish what making love really is. Do you understand that? I reduce it.
Yes, no, I understand
That's
that.
exactly what they're saying. So if you want to use truth to say, well, everything is true because everybody believes what it is, then there's no point in using the word truth at all. It's become diminished. Do you understand that? It's been diminished. So either... And we live in a world that uses language like that. People say, I love this, I love that, I love your shoes, I love your attitude. And so we've even reduced love to what is convenient to our understanding of it. Does that make any sense?
Let me just ask Ron just two really far out questions. Just two really, call them crazy questions, right? Oh well, the first one isn't so crazy, but okay. So, is there a potential with the guides? I'm speaking of the guides right now as well, but you are part of that. I'm not trying to separate you, but is there a potential with Paul's work that in the future he will be touching on subjects like extraterrestrial life, for example, or something that's kind of outside of Paul's comfort zone right now?
Potential. All of it's potential. We don't limit our own teachings. We don't limit our own teachings, so we are responsible. However, we are responsible as teachers to our students, to our students. We're not teaching to entertain, and we are not teaching to entertain, but to enlighten, If we were teaching to entertain, if we were teaching to entertain, there are many things we could address. There are many things we could address that are quite interesting, and worthy of discussion, But our job is rather different. As we attune through our work. We make information available to our students. We make information available to our students that is not available to them in this realm, that is not available to them in this realm. They become the explorer of the higher dimensions. They become the explorer of the higher dimensions. They don't need us to tell them what happens. They don't need to tell us. They don't need us to tell them what happens. They will discover themselves. They will discover it themselves. That is our job to teach. That is our job to teach, not to tell stories.
Okay.
We are not limited in what we will teach. We are not limited in what we will teach, but we are honor bound by our ability. But
Okay.
we are honor bound by our ability to render a teaching, to render a teaching to our students.
Okay,
period.
okay. So are you communicating then with other realms? I mean, is it just this realm you're teaching? Is there other realms that you teach as well?
We exist many places. We exist many places. We are known in many ways, and we are known in many ways. How you know us through Paul. How you know us through Paul is how we are met by you. You're asking who we are. You are asking who we are and how we operate and how we operate. We are not in this dimension. We are not in this dimension
Okay.
as you comprehend it, but we understand ourselves. But we understand ourselves in the moment of reality, in the moment or reality that you are sharing, sharing.
But it could be other realities that you also, other beings that you're also teaching as well. It's not just the human beings, it could be others.
Your ideas of who you are very limited. You expect yourself to be what you are. You expect yourself to be what you are in the forms you have taken. In the forms you have taken. We will answer your question simply by saying, if you really knew who you were, you wouldn't even be asking us this. Because you don't know who you are. Because you don't know who you are, you perceive yourself in separation. You perceive yourself in separation from other beings elsewhere, when in fact you're not.
Yeah. I guess what they're saying there is that we are the all that other things that I'm talking about.
That's what it sounded like to me, too.
That's what it sounded like.
When I did my very first book signing for I Am the Word at the old East West Books in Los Angeles, and there were like maybe 10 people there. Nobody knew what I was doing and cared. And I read a little bit of the book. Somebody in the first row raised her hand and said, "This sounds like the stuff that the Intergalactic Council of so-and-so is saying. And what are you going to do? What do your guides have to say about those evil aliens?" And I didn't know what the answer was, and the guides piped in and said, isn't it bad enough that you can't get along with one another here? Now you have to go about vilifying the rest of the universe? Again, the idea that we're broadcasting our own problems elsewhere seems to be something that we tend to do. And so I don't know who else we are beyond what they've said. You have no idea. They're saying basically you have no idea. You experience yourself in this form. You experience yourself in this form, in this reality, and assume that's all you are, and assume that's all you are. In fact, you are far more. That is what we teach you. That is what we teach you if you attend to the text we write. Period.
So there you go. And again, as we just agreed there, we can disagree or we can say it differently. It would seem in this moment what they're saying is that we are everything. We are all those other modalities. It's all part of us. It's just us projecting ourselves into different form, potentially.
Well, you're saying the question then would be who is projecting the self, and it's not the small self that would be projecting itself. It would be that everything finally is an expression of one source. I suspect that would be what you mean.
Yes, and in this human incarnation, we've just, with the forget-me-not, I call it forget-me-not, we've just forgotten or purposely forgotten so we can have the human experience of what we truly are, so that we can get, and maybe the other expressions, some, not all, have got the same veil, maybe not as much, just so that we can get on and have a humongous mass experience of different things all over the place. The soul splits off into everything it can be, maybe all at once, maybe, who knows. That's what I take from what it's saying there.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go.